The jack-o'-lantern tradition is rooted in old Irish and Scottish customs, particularly the legend of Stingy Jack. The tale describes a devious man named Jack who was denied entry to both heaven and hell. Doomed to roam the earth with only a burning coal placed inside a carved-out turnip to light his way. To ward off Jack's wandering spirit and other malevolent entities during the seasonal festivities like Samhain, people in the British Isles began carving grotesque faces into root vegetables such as turnips, beets, or potatoes and placing them in windows. When Irish and Scottish immigrants brought this tradition to North America in the 19th century, they found the native pumpkin to be a far larger and easier medium to carve, leading to the iconic Halloween symbol we know today. The custom of trick-or-treating evolved from several ancient European traditions. One major root is the medieval practice of souling, where the poor, and later children, would go door to door on All Hallows' Eve, offering to pray for the souls of the dead of the household in exchange for small pastries called soul cakes. In Scotland and Ireland, a similar tradition called guising involved children dressing in costumes and performing a small trick, like singing a song or reciting a poem, to receive a treat of food, nuts, or coins. Another contributing practice was bell-quicking, a German-American Christmas custom where costumed figures would visit homes, often testing residents to see if they could guess the bell-quickle's identity in exchange for treats. When Irish and Scottish immigrants brought their customs to North America, these combined practices, along with the rise of widespread mischief on Halloween, gave way to the phrase trick-or-treat in the 1920s. It was a light-hearted ultimatum that offered an alternative to the vandalism by giving a sweet reward. The strange history of apples at Halloween combines ancient romance with profound mythology and modern paranoia, creating a tradition far weirder than a simple candy-coated treat. The fruit's association with the holiday is rooted in the Roman festival of Pomona, the goddess of fruits and trees, celebrated around the time of the Celtic New Year, Samhain. As the two traditions merged, apples, symbols of fertility, love, and immortality, became central to harvest celebrations, giving rise to courting rituals like bobbing for apples and divining a future spouse's initials with an apple peel. However, the apple has always carried a dark symbolic weight, dating back to antiquity. In mythology, this is partly due to a coincidence of language. The Latin word for apple is malum, which is almost identical to malum, which means evil or bad. This linguistic association helped cast the apple as the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, and later as the deadly instrument used by the evil queen in Snow White. This mythological connection to danger and death laid the symbolic groundwork for the 20th century's true terror, the infamous urban legend of Halloween sadism. Fueled by media panic, paranoia spread that malicious strangers were hiding razor blades or poison inside homemade treats and fresh apples given to trick-or-treaters. And though these rumors were almost entirely unsubstantiated, the fear effectively drove parents to discard apples, cementing the pre-packaged store-bought candy as the only safe treat and concluding the apple's long, complicated reign as the weirdest Halloween staple. The evolution of horror cinema began almost immediately with the birth of filmmaking, establishing distinct eras defined by societal fears and technological advancements. The progenitor of the genre was established in the silent era between 1896 and 1927 by Georges Méliès with his short Le Manoir du Diable, or The House of the Devil, in 1896. This film, a 3-minute living picture, used trick photography to conjure bats, skeletons, and the devil himself as spectacles of fantasy. This early supernatural focus soon gave way to the unsettling psychological themes of German Expressionism in the 1920s, a movement that sought to externalize internal madness and dread through stylized set design. This era yielded two quintessential works, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 1920, and F. W. Murnau's chilling masterpiece Nosferatu in 1922. This aesthetic directly informed Hollywood's first major horror cycle, the Universal monster era of the 1930s and 40s. And then from the Gothic romance to visceral reality, during the 1950s to the 1970s, the 20th century brought a profound shift. Films like Dracula and Frankenstein cemented the tragic romantic monster archetype and established the genre's first cinematic icons in Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. The post-World War II atomic age saw anxieties over science, communism, and nuclear power manifest in a new wave of monster movies, creature features, which produced films about gargantuan threats like the giant ants in the film Them in 1954. Simultaneously, British production company Hammer Film Productions revitalized the classic Gothic monster with vibrant technicolor, heightened sexuality, and explicit gore in features like The Horror of Dracula. The true revolution, however, occurred in the psycho-horror era, which dragged horror from the vagaries of the supernatural into the stark, modern world. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in 1960 shocked audiences by focusing on a human, psychologically disturbed killer, and George A. Romero's independent Night of the Living Dead in 1968 brought explicit, visceral gore and social commentary to the screen. This trend of escalating realism and terror culminated in the mid-70s with films like The Exorcist and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. These features favored a cinema verite aesthetic, directly setting the stage for John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, a film that synthesized the human killer with the relentless, unkillable nature of a monster that launched the dominant slasher subgenre we know today. Spirit photography was a fascinating and often controversial genre that emerged in the Victorian era, driven primarily by the spiritualism movement and the era's widespread preoccupation with death and mourning. During the time, most families suffered some sort of loss due to war, plague, and other illness. It's important to note that this historical practice refers to studio portraits created in the 19th and early 20th centuries and is generally recognized as a form of mediumistic fraud, using photographic trickery rather than evidence of unexplained ghost captures or modern paranormal investigation. Its core appeal was the promise of providing a tangible visual connection to deceased loved ones. Photographers, claiming to possess a unique sensitivity or using special techniques, would take a portrait of a living client, and upon development, a hazy, translucent spirit would appear alongside them. For grieving people, these images were cherished keepsakes that offered powerful solace, confirming their hope that the departed were still watching over them. The popularity of this genre largely rested on the photographer's ability to create convincing effects. In reality, spirit photography was achieved through clever darkroom manipulation, such as double exposures, or reusing photographic plates with faint prior images. Pioneers like William Mumler found a massive, grieving clientele, although skeptics and magicians, most famously Harry Houdini, worked tirelessly to expose the methods. The emotional desire for this proof of life after death meant the practice remained popular for decades, reflecting a deep cultural longing for reassurance about the afterlife. The concept of the thinning veil is the ancient spiritual heart of Halloween. It defines the holiday long before costumes, candy, or horror movies ever existed. It's the foundational belief that gives the entire season its unmistakable, spooky atmosphere. For the ancient Celts, who lived across what is now Ireland, the UK, and northern France, October 31st marked a critical turning point known as Samhain. This wasn't just the end of the harvest, it was the final night of the Celtic calendar year, signifying the switch from the light of summer into the dark, cold depths of winter. On this single night, the Celts had a powerful belief. The barrier or veil separating our world from the supernatural otherworld became incredibly weak. The otherworld was the mystical domain of the dead, as well as powerful, mischievous creatures like fairies. The thinning of this veil created a time of both profound connection and serious danger. The souls of those who had died that year were believed to return to visit their homes. This offered a unique chance for families to commune with their beloved ancestors. However, it also meant that malevolent, chaotic spirits and dark entities could easily cross over, posing a real threat to crops, livestock, and the community. To navigate this peril, the Celts developed several key rituals. They would extinguish all their home hearth fires and light enormous communal bonfires instead. These great fires served two purposes. They warded off evil spirits with light and smoke, and their heat was used by the Druids, which are Celtic priests, to perform powerful divination and make critical predictions for the year ahead. They also donned the first ever Halloween costumes, disguises made of animal hides and heads to confuse the roaming spirits and blend in with them. Later, as Christian traditions merged with Samhain to create All Hallows Eve, the practice of making offerings evolved. People would leave food and wine on their doorsteps to appease the roaming spirits. This developed into the medieval Christian custom of souling, where the poor went door to door, receiving soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. This act of giving offerings is a direct historical predecessor to our modern tradition of trick-or-treating. While we now celebrate with manufactured scares, the underlying tension and thrill, that feeling that something otherworldly is possible on a cold October night, all comes down to this single, ancient, and powerful belief. The feeling of the spooky season is simply a modern echo of the night that the veil is thinning. Of all the symbols we associate with Halloween, few are as iconic as the witch soaring across the moon on her broomstick. This image has graced our holiday folklore for centuries, but the actual complex origin of this association is far darker and more fascinating than any cartoon. It's a history tangled with pagan rituals, powerful herbs, and the deliberate suppression of female power. To trace the origins, we must first go back to pre-Christian agrarian Europe. The first association of women riding sticks or staves came from pagan fertility rites. Rural women would symbolically ride farming tools, like broomsticks or pitchforks, leaping high in the air through their fields. This rite was believed to literally encourage their crops to grow higher, a simple, hopeful tradition. The real catalyst for the flying myth comes from herbalism. Many women were skilled folk healers who worked with potent, psychoactive plants. They developed special flying ointments, concoctions designed to cause hallucinatory sensations. These recipes often featured toxic herbs like the Atropa belladonna, henbane, and datura. To quickly absorb these powerful and often poisonous compounds without ingesting them, these women would apply the ointment to mucous membranes, which I will leave you to speculate. They used a wooden stick or a broom handle as an applicator. The resulting rush gave the user the terrifying sensation of literally flying or levitating. This is where the history turns punitive. During the notorious European witch trials of the early modern period, these practices were recorded and twisted in official documents. Inquisitors, documenting the supposed confessions of accused women, interpreted the pharmacological effects as literal communion with the devil. These detailed records, found in text and trial transcripts, confirmed that the image of the broom was not random, but tied directly to the tool used in these secret nighttime activities. Sticks themselves, originally a tool of domestic labor, were deliberately weaponized as propaganda. Witch hunters used this myth to discredit and reduce women's power, associating their extensive knowledge of healing and nature with a mere instrument of simple housework. More explicitly, the broomstick was frequently assigned phallic symbolism in the records. This twisted imagery was used to publicly shame and demonize women, suggesting a perversion of natural roles and a sexual pact with the devil, thus justifying their severe persecutions. The innocent image of a woman leaping for good harvest was tragically transformed into the terrifying vehicle of evil. The witch's broom is thus a powerful reminder that the scariest parts of Halloween history are often rooted in fear, misinterpretation, and the desire to control and suppress powerful knowledge.